On Friday, 20th of July, 2018, just after sunset, London moved as it always did. But that night, one of Battersea's flats hid something no one was supposed to find. A small discovery there would expose a world few even knew existed. Years later, on a cold Monday evening in February 2021, riders set off again, but this time had a proper dress code with pink rucksacks on their backs. They worked in silence and moved between the city's wealthiest postcodes. It looked professional, organized, and almost ordinary. But the truth was anything but. And just weeks before that February night, a passenger stepped off a long flight from Brazil, carrying nothing that drew attention, at least not on the outside. What he carried within would nearly cost him his life. This is the story of how British investigators tracked, exposed and crushed a criminal web stretching from Brazil to London streets. Welcome to UK Crime Documentaries. Let's get straight into the case. But while one network was collapsing, another was already rising. And this one would take the idea of drug delivery to an entirely new level. By the start of 2020, a new network had taken over the streets of London. At first glance, looked like part of the city's booming courier trade. Riders moved through traffic in bright jackets and pink rucksacks, cutting between buses and black cabs, carrying small insulated bags that looked no different from Deliveroo or Uber Eats. But these weren't takeaway orders. At the center was Tiago Tomás de Lima, 31, a Brazilian national who had built an underground business that turned London's nightlife into a marketplace. Working under him were 5 women: Vanessa Ananias, 29, Nayara Ribeiro, 33, Andressa Santos, 25, Nayeli Fernandez Silva, 25, and Larissy Nascimento dos Reis, 24. All of them had arrived in the UK in search of work, and all became part of one of the most polished drug courier systems the Met had ever seen. Each woman was assigned a team number, 1 through 4, printed on the back of her pink backpack. Inside was a small wallet, color-coded with her name, holding both her cash and the day's inventory. They were expected to keep to strict delivery quotas and could be carrying up to £10,000 worth of drugs in a single shift. The system ran like clockwork. Deliveries began at 1 p.m. and continued until 10 p.m. They worked from Monday to Saturday, taking Sundays off, a sign, de Lima said, that the business ran smoothly enough to rest for a day. Customers were given a candy shop list, a digital catalogue, neat columns with prices and codes. But each line corresponded to one of more than 90 substances: cocaine, MDMA, ketamine, cannabis sweets, LSD tabs, prescription sedatives, even their own pressed heart-shaped ecstasy pills. The language was professional, coded, and always polite. It wasn't street corner dealing. It was a service, efficient, on demand, and deliberately made to look legitimate. Every rucksack, each shift, and each packet was part of a schedule that moved quietly through London's richest districts. At the wholesale level, De Lima used EncroChat, the encrypted phone system that organized crime groups across Europe believed to be untraceable. On it, he handled bulk deals, multi-kilo consignments of cocaine, MDMA, and crystal meth, all negotiated through coded usernames. In one exchange, he told another user he could sell anything I touch. We will touch on his shocking Encro activity in a few minutes. At the retail level, things were just as controlled. Couriers handled daily deliveries through Signal, a secure messaging app configured to auto-delete conversations every 6 hours. The operation ran from 2 main bases in Notting Hill and South Kensington, both of which were treated as dispatch centres. Drivers collected pre-packed rucksacks, made their rounds, and returned before closing time at 10 p.m. The efficiency was staggering. Even after police analysed seized devices, investigators found spreadsheets detailing profits and stock valuations, £90,000 a month in retail sales alone, and an inventory worth close to £2 million. Each courier was paid a daily rate of £220, a wage high enough to ensure loyalty, but low enough to keep costs under control. But what De Lima didn't know was that every one of those encrypted exchanges, every transaction he believed untouchable, was already being recorded. And soon, the secret world he'd built behind those pink rucksacks would start to unravel. When Operation Venetic began in 2020, its purpose was simple: to dismantle the encrypted criminal world that had thrived under EncroChat. What investigators didn't expect was just how deep London's own network ran. Among the thousands of intercepted accounts, one stood out. Its activity centered around the capital, using codes that matched regular patterns of movement. The user's name was disguised, but the language was familiar. Through those recovered messages, a full picture of the operation came into focus. De Lima's EncroChat history showed bulk purchases of 10 to 15 kilograms of cocaine per deal, with at least one transaction recorded for 50 kilograms in a single order. But the deeper analysts went, the stranger the content became. De Lima's conversations revealed more than drug dealing. There were discussions about forging fake IDs, arranging helicopter extractions to move people out of the country, and even bribing a prison officer. The account handled everything from logistics to laundering, a window into a man who saw himself not as a dealer, but as an entrepreneur running a full-service criminal business. Once the messages were decoded, detectives started piecing together the physical evidence. Forensic teams matched the digital activity to ledgers, phones, and labeled bags seized in earlier raids. Serial numbers and notations linked directly to the same packaging found in multiple London flats. The addresses that appeared in De Lima's encrypted exchanges, including the Cromwell Road and South Kensington distribution centres, as well as the storage unit in Alperton, matched the real-world sites under surveillance. It was the pattern that confirmed everything. Police take these pink backpacks as the visual identifier connecting raids across the city. They appeared in surveillance photos, seized CCTV stills, and inside the flats themselves. By the time Operation Venetic reached its height, the so-called candy shop network was no longer invisible, and with the full structure exposed, the Met prepared to move. On the morning of 22nd February 2021, the operation that had been months in the making finally began. Across West London, teams from the Metropolitan Police Specialist Crime Unit moved in at once, 4 addresses, hit within minutes of each other. The locations had been under constant watch, and together they formed the backbone of Tiago de Lima's network. When officers entered the Cromwell Road flat, they found a scene that looked more like a warehouse than a home. Tables covered in small labeled packets stretched across the room. Each was tagged, measured, and laid out for delivery. By the time forensic teams finished counting, there were 133 separate drug exhibits. Inside those bags were quantities of cocaine, MDMA, ketamine, and 4-CMC, all portioned into street deal amounts and ready for collection. At the Alperton storage unit, detectives uncovered the heavy machinery behind the operation: a commercial pill press, a cash counter, and boxes of packaging stacked to the ceiling. The unit held £54,000 in cash, along with scales, sealers, and a small stash of weapons used for protection. On a computer inside, investigators discovered detailed ledgers tracking profits, stock levels, and courier schedules, documents that showed how systematically the drugs moved through the city. Across the 4 sites, the seizures told the full story of scale. Police recovered 4 kilograms of cocaine, 8 kilograms of MDMA, 7 kilograms of methamphetamine, 3 kilograms of amphetamine, 1 kilogram of 4-CMC, 18 kilograms of cannabis, along with 2,493 doses of LSD, bags of magic mushrooms, cannabis sweets, prescription drugs, and nearly £2 million worth of narcotics in total. When the dust settled, detectives stood inside what was left of the network's core, a dismantled infrastructure that had once operated like a business built on speed, secrecy, and precision. As Detective Constable James Hughes of the Specialist Crime Unit said afterwards, "Every sale on those mopeds funded violence on our streets. The work we've done here shows exactly where that money leads and why we'll keep taking these networks apart." Within hours, the candy shop operation was over, but for those who'd built it, the reckoning was still to come. By the time the case reached Suffolk Crown Court, the story of the so-called Charlie's Angels gang had already become one of the most striking examples of organised drug delivery in Britain. Judge Gregory Perrins described the operation as a professional, highly organised criminal network, supplying a vast array of drugs on a vast scale. The courtroom listened as prosecutors outlined all the details that we've already covered. As the officers involved reflected on the outcome, one final statement summed up the case. It came from the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Crime Unit. They wore pink backpacks, but what they carried destroyed lives. When the sentences were read, there was no mistaking the scale of accountability. Tiago Tomás de Lima, aged 31, was sentenced to 18 years in prison. His second-in-command, Vanessa Ananias, received 6 years. The 3 core couriers, Nayara Ribeiro, Andressa Santos, and Nayena Fernandez Silva, were each given 4.5 years. Finally, Larissy Nascimento dos Reis, the gang's bookkeeper, who tracked profits and maintained earnings spreadsheets, was sentenced to 2 years and 3 months. In total, the sentences amounted to 37.5 years of imprisonment, a complete dismantling of a network that had once moved freely through London streets. It was Christmas Eve, 2020, when Luan Irving dos Santos Monteiro stepped off an overnight flight from Sao Paulo into Heathrow Terminal 2. He looked like any other passenger, but something about his behaviour caught the attention of Border Force officers. He hesitated when questioned, his hands trembled slightly, and his answers about his stay in London didn't quite line up. Monteiro was a 30-year-old student from Macapá, Brazil, who had travelled nearly 6,000 miles across the Atlantic. When officers escorted him for a routine baggage inspection, they found nothing unusual. No drugs, no hidden compartments, no signs of smuggling. It was only after he was taken for a medical scan that the real story surfaced. The X-ray revealed more than 100 capsule-shaped objects inside his stomach, later counted as 101 packages of cocaine, weighing a total of 1.2 kilograms, with a street value of nearly £98,000. Each capsule had been swallowed whole before his flight, tightly wrapped and sealed to withstand the 11-hour journey from Brazil to the UK. One rupture would have killed him within minutes. When questioned, Monteiro finally explained why he had risked his life. Before the pandemic, he had worked as a sex worker in Brazil. When COVID-19 restrictions hit, the work disappeared almost overnight. He was left without income, without clients, and trapped in a cycle of debt to a local drug supplier. That debt, around £2,000, roughly 15,000 Brazilian reais, grew as interest mounted. The same men who had lent him money began to threaten him, his mother, and his siblings. Monteiro told investigators that he was HIV positive and had turned to smuggling out of desperation. He believed the job would be a one-time payment, a way to clear his debt and start again. But once he swallowed the first capsule, there was no turning back. For more than 10 hours in the air, he sat upright in his seat, afraid to eat, drink, or move too suddenly, knowing that a single tear in the wrapping could burst open and poison him instantly. Monteiro was detained on the 24th of December 2020 and taken into custody at Heathrow. On Christmas Day, he was formally charged with attempting to import Class A drugs. The following Boxing Day, he pleaded guilty before Uxbridge Magistrates Court, admitting to swallowing the cocaine as part of a smuggling arrangement. Just over a month later, on the 28th of January 2021, the case was heard at Isleworth Crown Court. Prosecutors detailed his case along with all the evidence. Judge Edward Connell described it as a crime of desperation, but part of a violent global chain. Monteiro was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months in prison, half to be served in custody before deportation. What do you think about the cases and the sentences? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take. And if you found this breakdown informative, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode of UK Crime Documentaries.